Airports have a way of making everyone feel anonymous. The endless chatter, the shuffle of luggage wheels, the faint crackle of announcements, it all blends into a blur of routine. But not this time. Not on this day. Among the sea of travelers, Barron Trump stood out. He wasn't trying to draw attention, far from it. But sometimes, life has a way of finding you, even when you wish to be invisible. At first, it seemed like nothing. A staff member approached him, a brief exchange of words that seemed inconsequential. Maybe it was a question, maybe a minor misunderstanding. But then came another staff member. And another. Their expressions grew more serious, their gestures more direct. Whatever was unfolding, it wasn't small anymore. Barron stood tall, but there was a stillness to him, a kind of quiet resolve mixed with uncertainty. He wasn't arguing, but he wasn't backing down either. And then it happened, the unmistakable moment when everything changes. The staff gestured toward the exit. They were asking him to leave. The people around him stopped. Conversations faltered, movements slowed. It wasn't every day that you witnessed something like this. Whispers spread quickly, fragments of speculation weaving through the crowd. Some seemed concerned, others curious, a few too quick to judge. Yet no one stepped forward. The weight of public scrutiny had settled, and Barron stood alone in its harsh light. But this wasn't where the story ended. Not even close. Just when the moment teetered on the edge of becoming too much, she appeared. Melania Trump walked into the terminal with a kind of grace that didn't demand attention, it commanded it. There was no need for theatrics. She didn't rush or raise her voice. She simply moved toward her son, and in doing so, shifted the focus of the entire room. Her first move was to Barron. A hand on his shoulder, a glance that said more than any words could. Whatever passed between them in that moment, it gave him something he didn't have before, reassurance. Then she turned to the staff. Her tone wasn't confrontational, but it wasn't uncertain either. She spoke with the kind of authority that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you stand for. The change was almost immediate. The staff, who had been so rigid moments before, softened. Their postures eased, their words took on a different tone. It wasn't just about what Melania said, it was how she said it. The tension that had gripped the room seemed to dissipate, like a knot slowly untangling. For those watching, it was a moment they wouldn't soon forget. It wasn't just about resolving the situation, it was about what that resolution revealed. There, in the midst of a crowded terminal, under the weight of countless stares, a mother stood by her child. Not as a public figure, not as a first lady, but as a mother. That's what people saw. That's what stayed with them. What had led to this moment? What had sparked the confrontation in the first place? The answers weren't clear. But maybe they didn't need to be. Because sometimes, the details matter less than what we take away from them. Before we get into how this moment came to be and what happened next, let me ask you, what would you have done if you were in that terminal? If you saw what those people saw? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're as captivated by this story as we are, don't forget to like and subscribe for more moments that remind us of the human side behind the headlines. For a moment, it felt as though the air in the terminal had changed. Conversations dimmed, and all eyes were locked on the young man standing at the center of this storm. The quiet confidence that had defined Barron Trump just minutes earlier seemed to waver ever so slightly as staff gestured toward the exit once again. Yet, even in the midst of mounting tension, he held his ground, his expression calm but undeniably questioning. Why was this happening? What could have prompted such an unusual scene? The whispers from the crowd grew louder. Some speculated that it was a misunderstanding, perhaps a misplaced document or an unnoticed protocol. Others, less charitable in their interpretations, drew their own conclusions, speaking in hushed tones that carried just far enough to sting. A few travelers took out their phones, their curiosity outweighing their hesitation. Barron, it seemed, had become the unintended protagonist of a drama that no one fully understood. To the outside world, Barron Trump is often seen as a figure defined by contrasts, publicly known but rarely outspoken, part of a family that dominates headlines yet maintaining a certain distance from the chaos. But here, in this moment, he wasn't a name or a figure. He was a teenager, caught in a situation that felt as bewildering as it was unsettling. The staff, for their part, seemed unwavering. Their instructions were clear, their body language firm. There was no shouting, no overt aggression, but their insistence carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. It was as if some unspoken rule had been violated, though no one watching could say what it was. The crowd's reaction was divided. A woman standing nearby clutched her handbag, her brow furrowed in concern. "He's just a kid," she murmured to the person next to her. Others watched with a kind of detached curiosity, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. And then there were those who saw the scene as a spectacle, a rare glimpse into a world they typically only read about, now unfolding right before their eyes. What made this moment so striking wasn't just the confusion or the tension. It was the isolation. Despite being surrounded by people, Barron stood alone, facing a situation that no teenager, no person, for that matter, should have to handle on their own. And yet, just as it seemed the situation might escalate further, there was a shift. Melania Trump's arrival had already changed the tone of the room, but her actions in the moments that followed spoke volumes. She moved with intention, her focus unbroken. There was no hesitation as she approached the staff, her calm demeanor both disarming and commanding. Her voice, though steady and composed, carried a quiet authority that immediately demanded attention. The exchange between Melania and the staff was brief but impactful. Whatever explanation she offered seemed to cut through the tension that had been building. Faces softened, postures relaxed, and the once immovable barrier of resistance began to give way. And all the while, Barron stood by her side, his composure returning as he watched his mother navigate the moment with a strength that needed no spectacle to be seen. For the crowd, the resolution came almost as quickly as the incident had begun. The staff stepped back, their earlier insistence replaced with a quiet acknowledgement. Barron and Melania, without so much as a backward glance, walked toward their gate. But for those who witnessed it, the questions lingered. What had sparked this confrontation? Why had it unfolded so publicly? And perhaps most of all, how had a mother's quiet strength managed to turn what could have been a lasting embarrassment into a moment of dignity? As the crowd continued to murmur, their attention riveted on the tense exchange between Barron and the airport staff, a subtle but undeniable shift swept through the terminal. Melania Trump had arrived. Her presence wasn't announced or heralded by grand gestures, but the quiet authority she carried seemed to ripple through the room. For those watching, it felt as though someone had turned the volume down on the chaos, even before she uttered a word. She moved with a purpose that needed no validation, her steps measured and deliberate. There was no sign of panic or urgency, no dramatic displays. Instead, there was focus, and unshakable focus that seemed to say, "This ends here." Every eye was drawn to her as she approached Barron, who until then had stood alone in the eye of this unfolding storm. The unspoken connection between them was immediate. A mother who understood her child's quiet resilience, and a son who found solace in knowing he wasn't alone. Melania placed a hand on his shoulder, a small gesture but one that spoke volumes. She leaned in close, her words intended only for him. Whatever she said wasn't overheard, but Barron's posture shifted. His face, moments ago etched with quiet confusion, softened ever so slightly. It was as if the weight of the moment began to lift, if only a little. Turning to the staff, Melania's tone was steady but firm. Her words carried no hint of anger or accusation, but there was no mistaking the conviction behind them. She listened first, giving them a chance to explain a move that many in the crowd seemed to find unexpected. Then, with calm precision, she responded. What she said wasn't just about addressing the situation at hand, it was about setting a boundary. Her demeanor left no room for misinterpretation. This was not a confrontation, but it was certainly a resolution. The staff, who had seemed so unyielding moments before, began to shift their stance. Their rigid expressions softened, their gestures became less insistent. Whatever tension had gripped the situation was unraveling, not with force, but with quiet determination. One by one, the barriers seemed to fall away, and it became clear that the situation was reaching its turning point. For those watching, it wasn't just the resolution that left an impression, it was the way it unfolded. There was no shouting, no finger pointing, no spectacle. What they witnessed instead was something far more profound: composure in the face of chaos, strength that didn't need to demand attention, and a mother's unwavering defense of her child's dignity. But questions lingered. What exactly had triggered the staff's earlier insistence? What had been said in those quiet exchanges that shifted the tone so dramatically? And perhaps most curiously, how could such a public and potentially humiliating moment be transformed into one of quiet grace and resolve? As the situation de-escalated, Melania and Barron made their way toward their gate, leaving behind a crowd that was visibly subdued. Some whispered among themselves, others looked on in silence, but one thing was clear: this was a moment they wouldn't soon forget. Now, here's the question for you: what would you have done in Melania's place? Could you have navigated such a public and high-pressure moment with the same level of grace? And for those in the crowd, what lessons might they have taken from what they saw? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you see this moment and what it says about the power of calm leadership and unshakable support. As the scene settled, the crowd that had been transfixed by the unfolding drama began to disperse. The once tense interaction now felt like a distant echo. What had been a confrontation fraught with tension transformed into a moment of calm resolution, leaving many to wonder how things had taken such a sharp turn. Melania and Barron walked quietly toward their departure gate, heads held high but without any unnecessary displays of triumph. A staff member, who had been at the center of the earlier exchange, approached them with a gesture of clear intent. For a moment, the crowd watched again, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Was this the final word on what had transpired? The staff member extended a sincere apology, their tone reflecting genuine regret. While the exact nature of the earlier misunderstanding remained private, it was clear from their demeanor that they had reconsidered their approach. Melania listened carefully, her expression measured, acknowledging their words with a quiet nod. There were no dramatics, no grand declarations, only a simple resolution marked by understanding and mutual respect. For those who had witnessed the incident, the resolution spoke volumes. It wasn't about a public figure demanding privilege or special treatment. It wasn't even about the apology itself. It was about how the situation had been handled, with patience, with dignity, and without inflaming an already tense moment. In a world so often marked by hasty judgments and public clashes, this was something different, a reminder of the power of composed authority and respectful dialogue. The broader implications of the event were not lost on those who reflected on it later. How often do we see power wielded with empathy instead of dominance? How often do we witness someone step into a challenging moment and choose to de-escalate rather than escalate? Melania's actions reminded many that true authority is not about raising your voice, it's about knowing when and how to use it effectively. But beyond the immediate resolution, there were deeper lessons to be drawn. The crowd's varied reactions to Barron's initial ejection highlighted something universal: the ways we perceive and respond to vulnerability in others. Some had stood in quiet sympathy, others had indulged in idle speculation, and still others had simply watched, unsure of what to do. It raised a poignant question: in moments of public conflict, where do we see ourselves? As bystanders, participants, or something more? The incident also served as a stark reminder of the human element often overlooked in public life. It's easy to forget that behind the headlines and the personas are real people, people who navigate challenges, face misunderstandings, and experience moments of vulnerability just like anyone else. This moment, so public yet so personal, served as a mirror, reflecting not just the individuals involved but also the values we hold as a society. What would you have done if you were there, standing among the crowd? Would you have stepped in, remained silent, or walked away? And what does this story teach us about the ways we navigate moments of tension and misunderstanding in our own lives? As the airport returned to its usual rhythm, the memory of that day lingered for those who witnessed it. Some left with questions, others with a sense of admiration. But all of them, in one way or another, had been part of a moment that transcended its initial drama to become something far more meaningful. As the day at the airport returned to its usual rhythm, the story of what happened lingered in the minds of those who witnessed it. A moment of misunderstanding, a poised intervention, and an ending that spoke to something far greater than the event itself. What began as tension-filled confusion was resolved with grace and calm, leaving behind lessons worth considering. Reflecting on the key moments, it's impossible to overlook the transformation sparked by Melania Trump's presence. Her calm authority not only diffused the situation but also reminded everyone present of the quiet strength a parent can embody. It wasn't about demanding respect but earning it through composure and understanding. The way she approached the staff, her unspoken reassurance to Barron, and her insistence on fairness, all of it left an indelible mark. But as you think back on this story, there's something larger to consider. What does this incident reveal about how we handle conflict? How often do we, as onlookers, jump to conclusions without understanding the full context? How often do we allow ourselves to be swept up in the spectacle rather than seeking to understand the humanity behind it? These questions don't have simple answers, but they're worth asking. The crowd's reaction to Barron's initial ejection was telling. It showed the wide spectrum of human behavior in moments of public tension, curiosity, judgment, sympathy, and silence. Each of those responses says something about us as individuals and as a society. Where do you see yourself in that crowd? Would you have stepped forward, stood back, or simply watched? And what does that choice say about the way we perceive and engage with the struggles of others? This story isn't just about an airport incident. It's a reminder that every moment, no matter how public or private, carries with it the potential to reveal something deeper about relationships, authority, and the power of compassion. Whether you see yourself in Barron, Melania, the staff, or the crowd, there's something here to reflect on. So now, it's your turn. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have handled the situation differently if you were in Melania's shoes or standing among the onlookers? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on this unique and unforgettable encounter. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. We're committed to bringing you stories that not only captivate but also inspire reflection and conversation. Stay tuned for more moments that remind us of the humanity behind the headlines. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.